What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be breaking down two major NFL trades that just went down. First one, the Cleveland Browns would trade Myles Garret, the best defensive player in the entire league, to the Los Angeles Rams for Jared Verse, a first round pick in 2027, second round pick the year after that, and a third round pick in the year after that. Just a huge trade. I mean, when you have one of the best players in the league getting traded, something went down, something crazy has happened, and right here something crazy has happened. Just a huge move. I mean, there's so many different implications for so many different teams going on here. Cleveland Browns obviously their defense is gonna take a huge hit, but the teams in their division aren't gonna have to play Myles Garret twice a year. You know, the Rams now have Myles Garret, and their defense can be so much better, but now the teams in their division have to play Myles Garret 2 times a year. So much going on with that trade. The next one we're gonna break down is the Philadelphia Eagles trading A.J. Brown to the New England Patriots for a 2027 conditional 5th round pick, which is going to be the better of the 2 5th round picks they have, and then a 2028 first round pick. So two major trades with two very good players getting moved that really are going to shake up the league. So let's just jump in to how this is going to kind of affect teams, not from their depth chart, but how it's going to affect them with moving forward with their salary cap, with their draft picks, how they're going to be able to manage their team and the flexibility they're going to have. So first off, the Los Angeles Rams, they got a lot of guys that they're going to have to pay right now. Matthew Stafford signed him to a 1-year extension, but this year is a ton of money, and then they got a ton of void years over here. So if you don't know what void years are, basically in the NFL, when you sign a contract, there's two main important things. You have your base salary and you have your signing bonus. So let's say you sign a 4-year contract with a $20 million signing bonus. That means that $5 million are going to be spread out over 4 years rather than just $20 million in 1 year. So if you wanted to add, years onto that contract, even though for him it's still a 2-year contract, they're moving the signing bonus over to more years so they could have more money to work with in this period right here. Basically just gives a team more flexibility at that current time and allows them to spend more money on getting other players. You look at Devontae Adams, he's also got a void year, but this is his last year. What happens is, if you're on the last year of your deal and you have a void year, if the team that you're on lets you go in free agency and you sign with another team, that, in this case, $4 million will accelerate to that year and just have $4 million dead cap. If Matthew Stafford, if they were to let him go in 2028 and he were to retire or go sign with somebody else, these void years, he has 3 void years, would all accelerate to this year. So just be dead cap all in that year, just going against the cap that can't use it. So void years can be dangerous, but there's definitely use to them. Anyway, they've got a ton of other money, put up into players right now. Alaric Jackson is going to be getting paid quite a bit for the next 2 years. Kevin Dotson, expiring contracts, they might have to extend him. They just this offseason they gave quite a few people some extensions. They gave out quite a bit of money. Trent McDuffie, who they traded for this offseason from the Kansas City Chiefs, they made him the highest paid cornerback in the league. Myles Garret, he's got a ton of void years as well, but in these later years of his contract, he's going to get paid almost $50 million. So a lot of money going out there. Then we go down here. We have some big guys we're going to have to get extensions. Byron Young, one of the better speed rushers in the league, just an incredible player. Puka Nacua, arguably the best receiver in the entire league. He's going to get a bag, closer to $40 million per year probably. Steve Avila has been a starting guard for them for a while. Kobe Turner's been a great player for them rushing the passer. They've got a lot of guys who they're going to have to extend moving forward, and they're dishing out a lot of money right now to a lot of different people. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have made the Myles Garret trade because they're paying him a ton of money and they got to pay all these other people. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I am saying there are implications to this outside of the field that could impact them going forward. Like you see it with these, especially the Myles Garret contract, teams like to backload contracts so they have money to work with currently. The salary cap every year is going to go up. So this $8 million right here, if it was in 2029, inflation, whatever, I'm not a mathematician, but this $8 million in 2029 could be more like $4 million, if that makes any sense. So teams like to backload their contracts so they could have more money to spend right now, on top of also putting void years. So in the NFL, you have like different periods of where teams are in building their team. The Rams are buying. Some teams are selling, like the Browns are selling, they're retooling or rebuilding, whatever word you want to use. they're trying to get assets and get off of these bigger contracts so they can start building their team out more and have more money to work with, more flexibility moving forward in the future. If you look at how the Browns are impacted, that's a lot of orange. That's a lot of void years for a team that's not going to be very good. So we just talked about void years. I explained what that is. You see a ton of void years here for the Browns. I mean, just scrolling through a ton. So, you look at Deshaun Watson, under $44 million contract this year, but then you'd assume they're not going to bring him back in 2027. All this dead money right here will just accelerate here, and I think it's like 80 something million in total that'll just be dead in 2027. Huge hit for them. Then you have guys like Denzel Ward, who are getting paid quite a bit for the next 2 years. Then he's got void years. Jerry Jeudy, he's got void years. But you're really not in a competitive state right now, so paying Myles Garret all this money and having to worry about those void years down the line and all this stuff, I think just bringing in draft picks, bringing in a borderline superstar player in Jared Verse really helps you to be able to build your team and look more towards the future rather than thinking that you're going to compete right now, because I think we all can agree the Browns are not ready to compete. They don't have nearly as many guys to extend coming up as the Rams do, but they've got some guys, so they're going to have to dish out some contracts too if they want to maybe keep them long term. So, they really had to figure out what they were doing moving forward. As you can see, there's going to be a ton of dead money for them. So just a lot of different implications there with the money, but then you also have draft picks for both these teams. So the Rams, they don't like picks. Forget the picks. Next year in 2027, they don't have a first, third, or seventh. So they've got 4 draft picks moving forward. And now let's talk about the Ty Simpson pick here. It is a bit confusing. What's confusing now, and I think it might even be more confusing now than it was before, because you draft Ty Simpson at 13, think he's going to be the quarterback of the future. How long is Matthew Stafford going to be there? But then you also go out and you get Trent McDuffie. Okay. Kind of cancels out you're trying to compete now and for the future. McDuffie's still young. But then you go out and you trade for Myles Garret as well, and you get rid of one of your younger, better players and then draft picks. It is a little confusing to me with how tight they're going to be, with draft picks moving forward, how tight they're going to be with money, how they're going to really fill out this team. I think there are some questions, but there also, there could be opportunity for compensatory picks. So basically what a compensatory pick is, you have compensatory free agents every year. And when they go to leave your team, if another team signs them for a lot of money, I believe it's the top 35% of contracts, you can get picks back for them depending on how much they get paid, how well they play. So a guy like Trey Hendrickson this offseason was one of the higher paid, better free agents. So a team could potentially get a compensatory pick for him in the 3rd round. So interesting development there for them. But like I said, very confusing, what they're trying to do. They're trying to buy in now, but they're also trying to build for the future. There's a lot to say about that, and we don't really know what their plans have been. There's a lot of controversy around whether Sean McVay even wanted Ty Simpson in the first place. So a lot of questions there, but they don't have a lot of draft capital moving forward. Then the Browns pick up a ton of draft capital. Next year, they got 2 firsts, they got a second, third, 3 fourths, 2 5s, 2 7s. And then you can see 2028. They've got a lot of picks going forward. So they've supplemented this team with a ton of picks moving forward. They could trade up, drop back, get more picks. They just have a lot of pieces to continue building their team, which they really need to do that. There's just been so many holes in this team for a long time. They haven't really been able to compete. You could try to keep Myles Garret and try to just magically put something together, but realistically, it's probably not going to happen. And this is probably one of the better packages you could have gotten. But let's really look at, the difference between Myles Garret and Jared Verse, because it's hard to look at the stats and think about how much better somebody is. Like, obviously, you see Myles Garret has 23 sacks to Jared Verse's 7.5. That's a lot more sacks. But, how much better is Myles Garret than Jared Verse? And the answer is a ton. Myles Garret is the best player, is the best defensive player, maybe even the best player in the entire league. You look at the numbers. Incredible. 23 sacks, breaking the record. He's getting pressures all the time. Basically, anywhere from 15 to 18% quarterback pressure rate you can see right here. That is considered elite. Myles Garrett's sitting at 16.3 while being double teamed 59% of the time and getting chipped 26% of the time. A chip basically means a tight end or running back going in, throwing a shoulder and leaking out. for a pass. So he's getting blocked by multiple people on every single play, and he's making this impact. It's just ridiculous. And then he's such a good run defender. And then being on the Browns, in the fourth quarter, you don't have the lead. So you're there, you're stopping the runs. You're not allowed to, just pin your ears back and get upfield and get after the quarterback. If he was in that position more and, had the lead at the end of games and teams were having to throw the ball and he could just get after the quarterback, oh my gosh, just opens up so many things for him and his teammates. He's just like huge guy, amazing athlete. Myles Garret is just absolutely incredible. Obviously he is 30. I believe he turns 31 in December. So, how many years are you going to get of him? I would assume maybe, 3 more years of his prime, maybe. It is questionable with, defensive linemen and just football players in general. He has had some foot injuries, which foot injuries for bigger, heavier guys can be a pretty big issue. So, it's possible they could only get like 2 more good years out of him. It's possible he could play for another 4 years, 5. You never know. The same thing could happen to Jared Verse. He's 25. You expect him to continue growing for the next, 5, 6 years, but maybe he gets hurt next year and he's never the same player. Now, hoping or assuming that's going to happen, but I think there is something to say about the age difference there and where the Rams are going to be, in 5 years. Give up this draft capital, give up this young player for a guy you don't know how much longer he's going to be there. But I mean, when we're talking about the NFL, like winning the Super Bowl is everything. If you could win a Super Bowl, go for it. If you can win, don't think about it. Like, go get that player that you think can get you over, over that hump, over to the next level. I think Myles Garret just gets you there 100%. You look at Jared Verse's stats, obviously they're not as good, but Jared Verse is also getting double teamed, also getting chipped. The Browns and Rams both had 2 of the better defenses in the entire league last year. His pressure rate's not as high as Myles Garret, obviously, but this is still a good player. And like I said with the age stuff, if he can continue growing for another 5 to 6 years, he's probably never going to be Myles Garret, for being honest. But he could be, like a superstar level edge rusher. I mean, we saw flashes that his power, his ability to get to the quarterback is just incredible. So, you let him develop and you have these draft picks and you have this more flexibility with your cap. Are you ever going to get a player, at the level of Myles Garret? Probably not. How many times do we see Myles Garret? We've seen 1. But like, yeah, just these 2 teams are in completely different situations. I think it's a win-win for both. But obviously, there's someone to say that if the Rams don't win a Super Bowl, obviously, you have questions, but you can't think like that. You got to go out and get who you think gives you the best chance to win every year. And Myles Garret definitely gives them the best chance. But so I would say it's pretty much a win-win trade. And there's also a very interesting clause in the trade where if the Rams trade Myles Garret to somebody else in the AFC North, this 3rd round pick here becomes a 1st round pick. It's just very interesting little nook in there that you don't really see too often. It's just a little pretty funny. But anyways, let's move on to the next trade. AJ Brown to the Patriots for a 1st and a 5th round pick. AJ Brown had his struggles. There's been so much controversy with Jalen Hurts and the offensive coordinator and play calling and all that. Just to say it, like, AJ Brown is a great player. He's one of the better, more physical, stronger receivers in the league. He has been for quite a few years now. And, he's been successful with the Eagles. They've won a Super Bowl. And, last year things didn't really work out, and we'll get into that a little bit. What kind of caused that? What are we looking at? What happened to him and the team last year? But first, let's just talk about how this move affects the Eagles. As we can see, they're going to be paying some guys quite a bit, and they've also got a ton of void years. They've got a lot of money tied up here. They've got guys they're going to have to extend coming up pretty soon, like Jalen Carter. They got that 5th-year option there, but he's going to want a massive contract. They're going to be locked up with a ton of money to a bunch of different people. And, with all these void years and people's contracts constantly going up, keeping somebody like AJ Brown, who, can you replace him? Yeah, kind of. If you can't use him and he's going to be like this kind of locker, I don't want to say cancer, but there's going to be issues in the locker room. Yeah, and you could pick up a 1st round pick and a 5th round pick, do that. Obviously you don't want to get rid of talent like that when you have it. but there are times where, you know, you have to do what you do. You have to do what you got to do. And then for the Patriots, you know, they need to get Drake May some weapons. Last year in the Super Bowl, we kind of saw he didn't really have a ton. He also, you know, didn't show up, and there was a lot going on there. Seahawks defense kind of, you know, just completely engulfed them. They couldn't do anything. But, you know, this offseason, they cut Stephon Diggs, but then they bring in Romeo Doubs. They bring in A.J. Brown now. You know, younger guys like Kyle Williams and Pop Douglas and Kayshon Boutte. These guys are going to continue to develop, and then he's got his tight ends. So, you know, they're giving him weapons, and he's got a good offensive line as well. So they're supplementing Drake May with this talent, you know, just getting him in the best position to win. And, you know, coming off of a Super Bowl, you know, you're going to the Super Bowl, buy in. Why not? You know, you have Drake May on this cheap contract. Why not? You know, like, he seems to be one of the better quarterbacks in the league. You're not really paying anybody a ton of money. You know, A.J. Brown's contract is not that bad, honestly. You know, he's got some pretty crazy void years, but, you know, in the time that you're paying him on this contract, the money's not that bad. And if you were already in the Super Bowl, you could probably get back there and compete. So this trade I also think is a win-win trade for both teams. You know, the Eagles, they bring in Mekhi Lemon, they draft Eli Stowers, they've got Devontae Smith, they trade for Dontavian Wicks. So they have other weapons that, you know, they could just kind of not even skip a beat, but also pick up this draft capital. And then the Patriots, you know, Mike Vrabel's had A.J. Brown in the past, and he's had success with him. So, you know, if he can kind of help solve whatever issues, you know, A.J. Brown is having, you know, I don't know what's going on with in the locker room and stuff, but if he's playing how we know he can play and doing what we know he can do, one of the better receivers in the league, and I think great trade for both sides. But let's just jump into what was going on with A.J. Brown last year. So look at the stats: 121 targets, 78 catches, 1,003 yards, 7 touchdowns. Good separation. You know, the yards after catch is a little bit down. He's a very physical guy. The target percentage, I believe, is a little bit down. This is only in 15 games as well. But, you know, 1,000-yard receiver. Very good player. Only 15 games putting up that production. That's great. But, you know, there was just like, the Eagles offense just didn't feel like it was moving. It didn't feel like things were working, even despite, you know, what some of the numbers may have said. So I took a deep dive into the analytics, the statistics, just to see, you know, what I could find that was just really weird. And I stumbled across his play action stats. So basically, play action is where the quarterback snaps the ball and he fakes it to a ball carrier, and then they end up throwing the ball. Very popular with the Seahawks last year. You know, Rams, a lot of teams who were at the top of the league and who had top receivers, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Puka Nacua, you know, all these top receivers were very good off of play action. And you look at A.J. Brown, very bad off of play action. 23 targets, 11 catches, no touchdowns, and he had a negative 10.8 reception EPA. Basically, EPA means estimated points added. It's just a statistic to help, you know, understand how much value somebody's adding to a play. So if you catch like a 15-yard pass and a 3rd and 30, those 15 yards, great for your stats, but they're not really going to help you in EPA because you're going to end up punting. His regular EPA was great, 24.9. It's not bad at all. If you look at play action, negative 10.8, you're like, okay, what's going on here? And this is a guy who should be thriving off of play action. You know, he could win on deep balls, getting down the field, jump balls, very physical. He's great at that, great at going across the field because he can take contact. He's so physical. He should be excelling in play action. And last year, in 2024, he had a 14.3 EPA. So, you know, what happened from last year to this year where he took such a step back? Is it him? Is it coaching? Is it Jalen Hurts? What's going on? But we know who A.J. Brown is. We know what he's done in the past. But last year, this is what I found that was really an outlier. Like, okay, this is an issue. What's going on? Everything else looked pretty fine. I found that on outbreaking routes, he wasn't very good at all. He had a negative 7 EPA on outbreaking routes. So, you know, corners, literally anything breaking to the outside. Not good on that. Whereas last year, 6.6 EPA. That's pretty good. So in those two specific things, he took a step back. And those are two things where you'd kind of think he would be good at. You know, outbreaking routes, he's such a threat getting down the field, and he's so physical, you know, coming out of breaks. Do you think he'd be able to get space going to the outside and be able to, you know, catch some comebacks and some out routes on the sideline, especially with how much he plays in the boundary? And you think he'd threatening verticals so much that, you know, DBs are backing off, and then quick break and they can't get to him. You know, on play action, you're thinking he could get downfield if teams are biting in on Saquon Barkley and this great, you know, offensive line. Or if he's coming across the middle of the field, he could, you know, take contact. But that didn't happen. So I think that, you know, let's live in a world of nuance where, yeah, you know, there were issues and we don't really know what happened, but we know who A.J. Brown is. We know what he can do. As long as the Patriots can really implement him correctly, you know, do right by him, you know, get him acclimated with Drake May, get acclimated with the offense, and figure out how, well, Mike Rabel knows how to use him, but if they could just get him back into where you've seen him in 24 and years prior, I think we know he's one of the best receivers in the league. But yeah, what's a recap of two major trades that came out of basically nowhere yesterday? I mean, I saw a notification early in the morning that there's a chance that Myles Garret could get traded. So I was like, okay, sure. And then all of a sudden, Myles Garret is a Ram. What the hell? I'm a Seahawks fan, if you didn't know, and that just ruined my day. That was just terrible. You don't want to see Myles Garret coming after your quarterback twice a year, and then maybe Aaron Donald's coming out of retirement. So then that's just a double whammy. But yeah, two good trades that I think benefit both teams. I think there's a lot of implications for not even just their teams, but other teams, you know, in their division. But yeah, if you like this video, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, comment. Yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.